Dan on, who is a current law enforcement officer, and he had shared with me a trail cam video that was taken, and it's a very interesting video. We'll discuss it tonight. If you get a chance, go to SasquatchChronicles.com, and it will be underneath this episode. I'll post the video, but it's a very interesting trail cam video. And he kind of explains, the videos, they only go for 5 or 10 seconds long because they're trying to catch drug runners coming through the area, and they don't want to spend time having guys go out there every week, replace SD cards. So they leave them up, have them run short. But it's very interesting. When I look at it, some people might disagree. It kind of has an orangutan type look to it. But it had thrown the trail cam off the tree, and then it appears to be burying it with leaves. I mean, it's not concrete evidence by any means, but it's very interesting to look at. And he'll also be sharing with us some of his encounters. I'll also be welcoming Ryan to the show. Ryan is a former law enforcement officer. And, it was really interesting to speak with Ryan when him and I spoke on the phone. He was talking about when you call the police department and you say you've seen Bigfoot or a UFO, what used to happen back then. You'll want to stay tuned for that. It's very, very interesting. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@SasquatchChronicles.com. And again, if you get a chance, check out the website, SasquatchChronicles.com. Right around the beginning of September, we'll have merchandise up on the website. Beanies, baseball tees, T-shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. So if you get a chance, check that out. I'll let you know as soon as it becomes available. Pick yourself up something nice. It's great gear. I wear it. I actually wear it all the time. And it's not just because my laundry's not done. I actually enjoy the gear. And so if you get a chance, check that out right around September 1st. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Ryan to the show. Ryan, thanks for coming on, brother.
Sure, man. Looking forward to it.
And if you would, I know you've had, you're a truck driver and, ex-military, you've been in law enforcement. You've done a lot of different things throughout your life. Having kind of a logical, I hate to say logical type career, what got you interested into Sasquatch?
Well, it's been a hobby of mine since I was a kid, in fact. I'm not really sure what started me. It might have been the legend of Boggy Creek when I was quite small. Saw that at the drive-in with my mother. I remember being terrified by it. And, of course, there was In Search Of. And I've just had an interest in it most of my life, as well as other things of that nature, the paranormal and whatnot. As I've gotten older here, it's become more of an obsession since I've gotten to know other people interested in it. I've actually gone out and done some research in the field.
And tell us about your experiences going out there in the field. I know I'm going to be playing a Rory you sent me here that you captured out there in Arizona, but if you would, just kind of talk about some of your experiences out there.
Well, like I said, I pretty recently got to go out with a fellow that invited me to go out. He has a research group in the Arizona Monkey on Rim area, and met him online 3-4 years ago. He invited me out with him to check out what he said was a hot spot, and it wound up being a hot spot. Some other researchers are in that area. It's the Tonto National Forest, near the Sitgreaves National Forest and the White River Apache area reservation of the Monkey on Rim in Arizona. And it's a forested, rocky, mountainous area, unlike a lot of people believe Arizona is all desert and cactus. Nothing like that. It's very squatchy. I hate to use that term, but it is. I only went out with him a handful of times, and due to personal differences, I will no longer go out there with him. However, it is a good spot. Our first night out, we got that audio that you're about to play. We found suspected footprints. That was in 2014. We found some footprints. Nothing worth casting because the ground's so hard and dry, but good 17, 18-inch tracks going up a steep embankment with 5-foot spread. I was raised hunting. I used to be an avid hunter. I'm not anymore. I'm familiar with deer tracks and the normal sign of animals in the woods. And this was something to bipedal for sure. That was earlier in the day. this guy that I was with, he had all the equipment. He had the parabolic gears, the recording equipment. He was kind of a technical guru. He was good with cameras. He'd been researching the area for quite a number of years. Later that night, the first night there, we set up the recording equipment, and before we got it started, I thought I heard in the distance a roar or a yell, and it just didn't sound right to me. It sounded definitely abnormal, and I told him, hey, get that turned on. I heard something, and not even a few minutes later, it did it again. And it wasn't for a few days later after we listened to it, cleaned up and on a stereo that we realized what we had. Now, that was right about dark that night, and the rest of the night we didn't hear that anymore. However, we did have some strange things happen. I had set up jingle bells on the fishing line all around the camp perimeter earlier in the day. Listening to the playback later the next day, we heard something playing with these jingle bells, like something was just tinkering with them. I had them set up in such a way that if something would have walked into the area, it would have, if it hadn't seen them, it would have set them off. It would have caught them around them, wrapped around them, hopefully, is what I was hoping. And we would have really heard it. But something with intelligence snuck up to them and played with them. It was funny, almost like a kid playing with them. We heard it later. I didn't hear it that night, even with the parabolic gears. We had footsteps in and around the campsite in the thick brush, just out of sight, out of the campfire. That first night, that was pretty much it. And I'll tell you, when the sun goes down in the Mogollon Rim, the whole environment changes. It gets scary. And as I said, I was an avid hunter years ago. I no longer hunt, but I love the woods, and I'm good in the woods. I've always had good instincts. There was an uneasiness out there, like being watched or, just a guttural fear I had. And I didn't feel comfortable leaving the campsite. And for me, being prior military and former law enforcement, I take pride in having guts. And that changes out there, really did, especially with all I know anymore from the research I've done. But anyhow, that was the first night out there. Now, the last time we were out was just this past May, and we had an interesting event take place. We didn't hear any yells or roars, but we heard twice through the night, at midnight, we heard an infant screaming and wailing. Like an infant. I don't mean a toddler. I mean like a 1-month-old baby. And anybody that has kids knows what a colicky baby sounds like. Now, there's people that camp in the area, and I want to put it past somebody to take their kid out there. But it was cold out. It wasn't really camping weather. And plus, we had the parabolic gears. We could not hear any other voices or a mother trying to coo her child. It was eerie. And not only that, it seemed to move through the trees from one direction out above us and then behind us within a matter of 2 minutes. Now, we heard that at midnight, and then we heard it about 3 in the morning, and it went on each time for a few minutes each time. Now, it was about 3 in the morning when it seemed to move around us, and I don't think it was a baby, but it sounded just like a baby.
That's interesting.
And I've read stories where other researchers have said they mimic children and infants. Now, I know cougars and bobcats can make a sound like a baby, but this was identical to it. You asked what else we found out there. We found the tracks. We found what looked like there was a boulder that sits up above where the campsite was, way up on the ridge that I found earlier in the day with moss on it. And you could just see the impression of about a 3-foot round sheet where something has been wearing that moss off, sitting there watching down there at the valley. And that was right above where we saw them tracks going up the steep embankment with a 5-foot spread. I'm speculating. I can't say for sure, but it leaves a lot to the imagination. The sightings that have been in that area, some of the documented sightings of a very large creature.
That whole area is pretty well known for being a hot spot. Let me play this roar. I want to get your take on what was going through your head when you heard this. Here's the roar. And it's looped 5 times. was going through your mind when you heard that?
When I first heard it, before we turned on the parabolic gear, like I said, we were just getting set up to start recording. I heard it with my ear, and it was pretty far off, and I knew it was something odd, but I wasn't sure what I heard. And we turned on the recorder, and we got it the second time it did it. And it wasn't for a few days after when he had listened to it on his equipment at home, and then he sent it to me, and I put earbuds on and really got a good listen to it. And it sounded to me, at that time, my jaw about hit the floor, because at first it sounds like a person starting to yell, but then it gets so deep at the end of it that there's no way a man could do that. Somebody with very large lung capacity, I can't say for sure what it is, but I can say I don't believe it's a human, and I know it's not a bear. And, of course, we had it sent off to another individual. I don't know if we can say them on the air or not. You know who I'm talking about, who put the spectrogram to it and compared it to others.
Who's that?
David Ellis with the Olympic Project.
Oh, yeah, David. Yeah, David's really good. That's who I send my stuff to, is David Ellis over at the Olympic Project.
Well, that's who looped that and cleaned it up the second time. Now, the guy that I was going out there with, he did it with his equipment, but he wasn't convinced of anything. I talked to a mutual friend of David Ellis's that's friends with me on Facebook, and her name's Julie. She sent it on to David Ellis, and then he gave it the works. He put the spectrogram to it and compared it to other known animals. And, well, you read the email I sent you that he sent me. He felt that it definitely was of interest, and it matched other suspected Sasquatch sounds that they had on file. And it didn't match up to any known animals in a spectrogram way. And I'm not a spectrogram guy. I really don't know much about all that as far as the decibels and where it's at. But
yeah, basically what he's saying is if there's like a bear has a certain signature, a wolf has a certain signature, and he's got a library of all the animals, he'll come back and tell you, yeah, that was a bear, that was a wolf, or he'll come back and tell you he doesn't know. But he actually uses a library of sounds.
Right, exactly. And he sent me that information, and I reviewed it. I was happy with it. I know it's not concrete evidence, but to me it is. And, being my first night out with a real researcher, I was happy with it. So I thought your listeners would like it.
Yeah, no, I hope they do. I enjoyed listening to it. Why do you think they're in the area? Why do you think that they're in that particular area?
Well, my personal opinion on it, and though I just recently got to go to the field, I've been into this subject for a long time, and I've read a lot about it, and I've listened to a lot of eyewitness encounters, even before I started listening to your show. And my guess is that there's a lot of them, and they're everywhere. And I think there's different types. And looking back in hindsight, as a kid growing up hunting in western Pennsylvania, I look back on some incidents that happened at that time that I didn't know at the time was Sasquatch activity, and I think now they work. Everything from stick structures to the voices you can't make out just over the ridge line and areas I hunted in for years that I knew everybody that hunted there. Usually when there was people down the ridge or at the hunting camp and I was up on the mountain, you could hear what they were saying. So I've had that happen a few times. Marvelous, fantastic stick structures where logs were balanced on each other and saplings were twisted together and bent over. I remember coming across that a few times as a younger man, thinking, how did somebody do this? Now, there hasn't been men up here doing this, and I knew full well they didn't. Now, all these years later, knowing what I know, I just think they're everywhere, Wes, and, a lot of places. And anywhere that's thick, anywhere that provides good cover, where it's not easily accessible by man, I think they're there.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think there's a lot more of them out there than most people realize. A lot of researchers will tell you they think that there's a limited amount. I don't think there's a limited amount. And I don't think that, well, I got to be careful what I say there. I think if you go looking, you may end up finding them or finding evidence of them.
Now, being a truck driver over the road, I've got my camera at the ready, and I hope I have an encounter, and I hope it's while I'm sitting in the seat and it's outside.
Yeah.
But you know how it is. From what I hear, the sightings are usually when you least expect it. But, well, I did want to add one thing that people might find interesting, and that's about the government and their knowledge. How, you know, I was in law enforcement, and this was back in the early 90s. And I spent 6 years. It was a promising career, and I got tired of it and decided I didn't want to do it. But during that 6-year tenure, I was a member of the Pennsylvania State Police, and I was a trooper. And at every barracks I was at, on the console at the PCO desk where I had to work as a trooper, desk duty, we all did, with a civilian PCO, maybe one night a week. I got injured at one point, was on it for weeks. And there's amongst all the phone numbers, all the government numbers, the tow truck numbers, the ambulance, the governor's office, out on the right-hand side of every barracks I was at, 3 different barracks I know for sure, because I looked, there's the Bigfoot UFO hotline. And when you're in a career like that, even though I've always been interested in this subject, I didn't talk about these subjects back then because it was a sure-way ticket to a shrink and career suicide. But I asked at least 1 or 2 older troopers about that number, and of course they smirked and laughed. And well, that's the number you give to the coots when they call, and it's pretty much the answer to that. My curiosity got the best of me one night. I called the number, and sure enough, it was an automated recording asking me my name, my information, and a narrative of my encounter, or whatever it is I was calling in for. Of course, I didn't have one, and I hung up on it. And later I used my credentials, and I called the phone company, and of course, in the performance of duties, if you were investigating harassment calls or anything like that, you could get the phone company at that time to trace a number. And I had them research the number, and it went, if memory serves me right, it's been 30 years, it went either to the Department of Agriculture or the Department of the Interior in Washington, D.C.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yes, and now, is that number still at all them barracks? My guess is it is. Now, with the Internet and things have changed, it's been 30 years, I'm sure their whole systems have changed. But that number was at least 3 barracks, so that tells me it was at all of them. And there's a barracks per county, every county in Pennsylvania. So, yeah, I've always found that intriguing, and that's just a little more evidence to me that the government knows what's going on.
Yeah, I have no doubt that they do. I agree with you 100%.
Anyhow, I thought you guys would like hearing about that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that with us. You know, that's something to where you don't hear that too often, but it doesn't shock me, really, to be honest with you. It doesn't shock me. I mean, I've talked to tribal police on reservations, and whenever there's strange UFO or Sasquatch related, they have a special number. They've told me they have a special number to call, and then those people deal with it. But if you ask them who it is, no one seems to know who it is. It's not the first time I've heard that. It's mainly on the tribal lands I've heard that before.
Right. But that's pretty much it for me. The older I get, the more of an obsession it becomes for me. You know, I have my page on Facebook, and I'm trying to work on a website right now. I can get the money up to do that. And I'm very intrigued by it. I love it. It's a hobby. And I hope to get out there more sometime.
What's your Facebook page?
Well, I have a group called Club of Secrets. In fact, you're on there. You just don't look at it. I cover everything from Bigfoot to paranormal and government conspiracies. Just a hobby of mine.
And is it open? Can anyone go check it out, or do you got to join?
It's a closed group, and if you're a member, you can add anybody. You're on there. You're an added member, so
yeah,
just look it up under my name, Club of Secrets. It's a closed group. Yeah, you have to be added.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you coming on, Ryan. I know you're driving right now, and you're busy. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on the show and share the sound with us and share the experiences. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your show and all the witnesses that call in. I love it. It's very worthwhile, and you do us all a service. Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Next up on the show, I want to welcome Dan. Dan is in law enforcement, so if you hear the radio in the background, he's actually multitasking at the moment. So if you need to break away, Dan, just let me know. Obviously, it's more important than our conversation if some emergency should come up. But if you would kind of start from the beginning, I know you've had experiences, and I took some time and really looked at the video you sent me, and I was really interested by that. Where did you kind of want to start with this, with the audience? Did you want to start with your encounters?
Sure. I mean, most of my stuff comes from guys that I've talked to or friends of mine, just in passing. Kind of in our field, it's kind of taboo, so getting guys to talk to you a little bit, I'm pretty impressed with the amount of guys and police officers you've had on. Maybe if we start with the newest episode with my buddy out of Georgia. Yeah,
let's start there. Tell us about that incident. Walk us into it.
Right. So in a nutshell, people know that I believe in Bigfoot, etc. So every once in a while I get, a post or a Bigfoot shows up on my Facebook or something like that. And I've known this guy for like 30 years. Well, he hits me up on the phone and he says, "Hey, what's up with the Facebook thing? Is that a joke about Bigfoot?" I'm like, "No, I think it's a real creature." And then he proceeds to tell me that last year he's out hunting in Georgia, and he says he thinks he sees a bear walking along the tree lines. And he says he brings up his rifle with scoped. I think it said it's 3x9. And he said that he was blown away. He said there's no question. He said it's like 7 to 8 foot Sasquatch walking along the tree line. That was like it in a nutshell. He said there's no doubt. And he said it's I know they exist. It was his quote.
Did he describe the creature to you?
Yeah, he said it was a brownish kind of bear color. And other than the height and big, I didn't really dig into it a whole lot. I just kind of acknowledged it and talked a little bit to him about it, some of the things that I've heard, etc. Pretty simplistic, but I mean, that's pretty credible evidence. I mean, he said he's looking through a 3x9 at something, no doubt, is a Sasquatch. I could hit him up and probably try and gather some more details, maybe about like the face or etc.
And that's interesting. Did he believe in Sasquatch prior to that?
I don't think he actually believed in it. I mean, he's open-minded. I mean, he's been a hunter all his life, etc. The way he tested the water with me, I mean, I've known this guy for 30 years. We've hunted together a ton of times. I mean, obviously he lives in Georgia. But for him to test the water like that tells me that, he probably hasn't told anyone else, and he was probably pretty unsure about the subject before telling me. So I think he's open-minded, but I don't think he was, quote, knew it existed until then. I mean, he flat told me then. He goes, "I know they exist."
And I know you spent some time as a game warden, too, as well, prior to getting into law enforcement. Most people may not know your background, but this isn't your first rodeo out in the woods. And you had come across some very interesting footage. Can you talk about that? Where did you come across it, and what did you think it was when you saw it? Kind of what's the story behind the video?
The nutshell is that I have a friend that I had assigned to a federal task force. He had a buddy who had been assigned to some guerrilla grows in Northern California, and a guerrilla grow is where the cartels usually grow marijuana in the furthest reaches of the forest. The further away from civilization, the better, so they go undiscovered. Well, these guys had gone in about 27 miles, I think 22 by quad and then the rest by foot, and put up trail cameras to try and capture some of this cartel coming in and out tending their gardens. And ultimately, when he retrieved the camera, he said when he found it, it was off the tree. He can compare how that happened. But then he played the video. He said he was absolutely shocked and that he didn't know what to make of it. Well, they brought it to me, and I looked at it, and I thought that it's not conclusive, but it sure definitely looks like some type of bipedal animal. I mean, you've got an arm, you've got a leg. I think you can see a hand at some point. The hair looks really coarse, but the structure's not right for a bear. Unfortunately, it's a pretty short clip. I think he had it set on probably about 10 seconds because obviously they want these cameras. They're not going to trek that far back in, every other week to check them. So they have them set on short clips.
Yeah, it was interesting when I was looking at it. It didn't look like what it reminded me of. I probably watched it 100 times last night. I slowed it down. And I'll put it up on the website. But what was interesting is it really reminded me of an orangutan sitting there throwing leaves almost on top of the camera. Is that kind of what you thought you saw?
It looks to me like it's purposely placed the camera in the leaf pile and is grabbing a handful of leaves and putting it over top of the camera. It looks like it's an intelligent attempt to conceal the trail cam. And I don't know what could do that. I don't know what could reach up and rip it off the tree. It definitely looks to me like it's standing bipedally. The structure of the arm, et cetera, doesn't look anything like a bear to me. I mean, it's just the bend is wrong.
Yeah, the bend is wrong. The color's wrong. The hair's wrong. And if that's a suit, that's one hell of a suit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I tried to slow it down a little bit, but it looks like the hair thins out in the abdominal region and is pretty uniform throughout the arm, but kind of like a coarse. Were you able to see the hand or the thumb at one point?
I did. Yeah.
Does that look like a hand to you?
Yeah. It did. It definitely looked like a hand. Remind me of orangutan, really. Remind me of orangutan. You know, orangutans have hands very similar to ours. And that's really what I thought when I first saw it. I was like, well, that's kind of weird. But then you hear about where it's at, and you're like, I don't think orangutan's going to survive out there. If you don't believe in Bigfoot, I guess orangutan's the only other explanation. What got you interested in this whole topic? What really piqued your interest in it?
I'd have to say it goes probably way back to Patterson, the Patty film. As a kid, I mean, seeing that, and then being a lifetime hunter, fisher, etc. I've always kind of had a curiosity about the unknown and specifically Bigfoot, just because it's a mystery, and obviously that's kind of the thing I like to do based on what I do is to dive in and try and solve mysteries. So I'm just intrigued by it, and the evidence. I like doing the research. I like putting things together and formulating what I think. I don't have any doubt. I mean, I've never seen one, but that's what I do. I put together pieces of the pie, crime scenes, etc. We weigh the evidence. And to me, there's absolutely no doubt that Sasquatch exists. I mean, we take people to trial and convict them of murder on less evidence. And yet we're going to say that with all this evidence that it's not a proven animal. It's just, to me, it's ludicrous.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad you said that. And I was talking to a skeptic the other day, and I don't mind skeptics at all, but I was talking to a skeptic the other day, and I said, just take 3 months and look into this. And if after 3 months you're convinced this is all BS, I'll accept what you have to say. But just take 3 months, give it an honest shake, and go out there, look at some of these track casts, listen to some of the eyewitnesses, and come back and tell me what you think. And after 3 months, he came back and he said, you know what, I think it probably exists now. He goes, I thought it was a joke before, but I didn't realize the amount of evidence that is actually out there. And I know you yourself have heard tree knocks and footsteps, and you've experienced the fear. Was that when you were out hunting?
No, I had gone on an expedition with a group, and the first night I was there, I heard two, but big, wide stride, heavy footsteps outside the tent. And I mean, I can't say for sure what it was, but I mean, we're humans. We know what people sound like. We know what bipedal sounds like when we walk. And, especially hunters, that's, we gauge animals with what's coming, It's how you tell for the most part by listening to the pattern of the step or et cetera. And it was obviously to me something big, heavy, and bipedal. Later that morning or the next morning I went out there and there were two big impressions, but it only looked like the heel was there. No toes, nothing else discernible. And the next night was a massive tree knock. I mean, it sounded like, Will Clark had let loose on a tree.
Yeah.
It was just insane. I mean, I've heard a lot of people, hit trees. I've hit trees with something, but I've never heard anything like that. I mean, it was a massive crack. And then there was a secondary, probably 100 yards away, that seemed like to be a reply to that. We had gone out on a night hike, and 3 of us had broken away from the group. And I'm pretty confident in the woods. I mean, I've been out at night many a time, going to my tree stand at O'Dark 30. That doesn't really faze me. And I've been in a lot of hairy situations. I mean, I've been doing search warrants in the house with homicide suspects with the SWAT team, and I've never experienced fear like that. I had to do combat breathing to reel myself in, and I have no idea. I mean, I was just walking through the forest, everything was cool, we're just looking around, and then all of a sudden just this overwhelming fear. I mean, I wanted to run. I've never experienced anything like that in my life. Honestly, until I listened to your show, started listening to people describe that over and over again, I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I just kind of thought, I freaked myself out. But after listening to you and other people talk about it, it started making sense as to why. And it was just crazy. Insane fear for no reason.
Yeah, and that fear is really hard to describe to someone that hasn't experienced it. I've had guys on the show that have been in combat and had, bullets flying past their head, and they say the fear that they experienced, what you're talking about, Dan, is compare that to battle. They'll take shots flying over their head any day of the week and twice on Sunday compared to what they experienced. And I've been trying to look into that and try and figure out what is causing that, what is causing this deep, scary fear to hit us, because you hear a lot of people experience that. I mean, I've had some of the biggest, baddest guys on the planet on the show, and they'll break down in tears because they were out there, they had overwhelming fear, they couldn't explain it, and all they wanted to do is run. And I don't think, a lot of these guys, I don't think they've ever run from anything, ever, in their life.
Yeah, I've been a SWAT team for 16 years. I've done many and many entries for bad guys. I've been shot at. I've had rounds fly past my head. Nothing even close. I mean, not combat. What those guys do in combat is totally different. I mean, I can't even imagine that. But I've been in the oh shit moments numerous times in my life, and nothing even close to that. I mean, yeah, I was scared when rounds are flying by and stuff. I was definitely concerned, but it wasn't like this, I just want to get up and run. Not even close. What
happened to your dad?
He was up around Silver Lake, which is the El Dorado National Forest off Highway 88, and he's a lifetime hunter fisher. That's where I got it from. I mean, he spent hours and hours in the woods, and he's one of those old school guys. I mean, I've never seen him really be afraid of anything. But he told me he was walking down a trail at night. I don't know if he was going to take a leak or what he was going to do. But he said something in the middle of the trail. He said he could see a big shadow, and he said he made the noise, and he more like a, ooh, ooh. He said it did that twice at him, and he said he felt it shake his insides. He said it scared the absolute crap out of him, and he turned and burned. He said he ran away. He said he didn't know what it was, had no idea. He wasn't closed-minded. We talked about, possibility of Sasquatch or whatever. I mean, he'd never confirm or anything like that, but he's like, I don't know what it was, but it's something I've never experienced before. He said it scared me. And he was armed at the time. I know he had a gun on his hip, etc. And they're hunting. And for him to turn and burn, I mean, that's quite a bit.
Yeah, that is quite a bit. And I've always wondered about that grunting, too. I'm starting to think that grunting sound is more or less I'm here, not necessarily an aggressive type, even though it feels aggressive when they do it. But I'm starting to think maybe that's not so much aggressive, more like I'm here, you're there. We recognize each other. And again, I could be completely wrong. But just from listening to witnesses, that's the first thing I have started to realize a little bit with that grunting. You had a friend of yours who's also in law enforcement that had a gold claim. What happened with that?
So they're up in Trinity. He was up there for a while as an officer, and he was working a claim. That's one of his hobbies. So I guess they're 7 to 10 miles back into some area, and they were working a pool. And he said the pool was pretty deep and it had a big rock overhang. he said they had experienced some screams that they'd never heard anything like it before. He said he could feel it, but he said they chalked it up to, kids, or they didn't know. He just said they didn't really concern themselves, went on doing their job. And he said he was underwater working the dredge, and he said that a big boulder came bombing down into the pool. Obviously, when it hit the water, it got his attention. He said he saw it come floating down. He said it was pretty good size, like basketball size, and he said it was probably thrown 30 feet away from the ledge. I don't think he really believes in Sasquatch. I mean, I think he just kind of doesn't really think about it. But I kind of started mapping it out to him. I'm like, hey, you're 7 to 10 miles in from nowhere. What are some kids going to be doing out there? You haven't seen anyone for days. You hear screams beforehand, and then you have a massive boulder. I don't know how much something like that would weigh, but, flies 30 feet off of the overhang out into the area we're at and hits the water. But, I mean, it could be someone back in there playing games, but to me, that kind of points in one direction.
And that's an interesting encounter, too, because you hear that a lot. I just had a encounter sent to me, these guys going down a river, and they were getting basketball-sized rocks thrown at them. So he decided to start up the boat, take off, and the creature stepped out and chased them. And he said, we were doing like 30 miles an hour down this river, and it was following us on the shoreline, no problem keeping up with us. And so it's scary, man. Some of the things that they do is terrifying. I wanted to ask you about your friend out there in California, and he was telling you about an encounter he had when he was riding his motorcycle.
Yeah, let's see. We'll call him Dave. So Dave also is in law enforcement, and I guess he's around 12 years old in the Quincy area. He said he was riding his motorcycle on some backlogging road, and he said that, he just put it bluntly, he said, I know the real Bigfoot ran down. I guess it was like a 30-foot embankment on both sides. So the road had been curved through the mountain, but he said it ran down the embankment, crossed the road in like one step, and then up the other side and out of view. And he said there was no question. So I didn't think it was a bear. I knew that it was a Bigfoot. There was no question.
Yeah, and usually that's how some of these encounters happen. They're usually really quick like that, but they are life-changing. Do you work rural areas?
I have
now as an officer.
Yeah, I have rural areas, but I'm not in mountainous terrain. We have a small mountain range in our county, but other than that, it's mainly wooded river bottoms areas, things like that. So we don't get any experiences down here as far as possible Bigfoot or anything like that.
When you were a game warden, did you ever come across anything strange?
Came across a lot of stuff strange, but as far as Bigfoot, I would say the only thing that I ever really investigated that gave me some pause was that one time I took where a horse had been killed. They were thinking a mountain lion, but man, it was a big horse. They moved it before I got there, so I didn't get a chance to see it, but just, I don't know. I guess it's possible a mountain lion can take down a horse. I'm sure they can, but just didn't seem right to me. Other than that, lots of crazy stuff, but nothing, I never heard anyone talk about Bigfoot. I think the wardens, to be truthfully, I think they're still, they don't want to talk about it. It's still taboo amongst them, because I still hunt with a lot of my game warden buddies, and, I still catch a lot of flack from them about Bigfoot. And you would think that those guys are out there enough, would experience stuff or be more open-minded, but I think maybe it's got a taboo within the agency, and so they're afraid to talk about it if they do have an experience. Yeah,
being in law enforcement, why do you think it's so taboo? Sometimes I'll talk to police officers. One that comes to mind is the Georgia cast that was taken by the cop. And he was so bent out of shape going out there, he thought these people were crazy. They were talking about monkeys banging on their home. He was just irritated going out there every time until he actually decided to start taking a look around. And he's one that casted the Elkins Creek cast. It's one of the most famous casts out there because it has dermal ridges in it. But prior to that, it was taboo. It was, it was a pain in the butt. He didn't want to go out and have to deal with it. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I don't know. I think across society in general, anything that's unknown or anything that is foreign and that society has named as hoax or mythical or something like that, they're afraid to be abnormal. I mean, because I take heat all the time. I mean, people always joke about it, but when I put the screws to them and lay out some facts, and then I ask them, tell me you think that those things, how did those things, play out? Explain that to me. I think they kind of come away from it a little less thinking it's taboo. I think it's from lack of knowledge. I truthfully think they don't look into it, and so they're ignorant of the situation, and so they just make fun of it because we make fun of what we don't know, of the unknown. As far as cops, I don't think I don't know, maybe because they're supposed to be bigger, tougher, and all-knowing. I don't know. It definitely seems like it's more taboo in those circles, though.
Yeah, it's interesting, though. It's you'd be shocked how many cops listen to the show. I was shocked. I get emails all the time from cops that listen to the show. And so I think even with all the jokes and all the smirks and all of the everything else out there, a lot of those guys like to listen to the show. They're intrigued by it, which is a good thing. And I wish more police officers did listen to the show, because sometimes when they go out to these rural areas and you run into a situation that just doesn't make sense, for it to be a person, it's nice to go, well, maybe it's this, or maybe it's that, or maybe it could be a Sasquatch, what's really going on out here. But if you're not open to any of that, then it's nothing.
Right. Trying to force a, square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
When I was out on that one event, the night that I got freaked out, really scared, I saw a white light out there, and it was like a soft glow, and I still can't explain it. And so I don't know if it's tied to all these things. I have no idea. It was just really weird. It looked like basketball size, and it was like a really soft glow, like if someone had put a flashlight under a sheet or something like that. But there was no camps there, no nothing. And I watched it for quite a while, and until I just well, I'm not walking over there. There's no way that's happening. So I just walked out. Just odd. Food for thought, I guess.
Yeah, no, it is food for thought. It is something, that's the other thing, a Sasquatch aside, I think people run into those lights. And I always kind of thought BS on the lights until I seen them myself. And exactly how you describe them, Dan, is exactly what we saw. It's almost like a real soft, ambient. It's a hard light to describe. It's not like a flashlight. It's not it's not really a big bright light. I mean, it is a bright light, but it's not. You know what I mean? It's more ambient color. I don't know what those things are. The only advice I give you on those is, I know Woody and I decided to chase one night, and it ended up chasing us back, and there was more than one that chased us back. And it scared the hell out of us. And to this day, I couldn't tell you what it was. It wasn't, the size of a basketball, maybe soccer ball, something like that. Just kind of floating around out there. And I was in the same boat as you. There was no campers down there. There was no fires. There was no homes. It wasn't a car. It was just this round light just kind of chilling in the forest. And it creeped me out. It really creeped me out.
Yeah, I was concerned. I mean, I ran a bunch of stuff through my head thinking, all right, is this like some satanic cult out in the middle of the the forest here, and they're going to sacrifice someone? Or but
right,
I didn't see any movement around it other than just this glow. It was odd, weird.
And I've been trying to look into those too, but it's hard to come up with information. Now, the night that you took off running, that you were in fear, was that the same night you saw the light?
Yeah, I didn't run.
Or you felt like running?
Yeah, I wanted to run. Yeah, but I knew that if you run, that's prey instinct, and I hadn't listened to your show yet, so I didn't know they were could be as violent as they could be. But I definitely knew I didn't want to run. So I just stayed in place until I could gather myself, which took about a minute of combat breathing to pull it back in. But it was like nothing I've ever experienced.
Well, hopefully other people come forward and talk about the lights too as well. You know, through all your research and everything, or looking into this, what do you think Sasquatch is, Dan?
Ancient hominid? I don't know. I think it's been around for a long time. It dates too far back to be some spaceship teleporting creature or something. I think it's something indigenous here. Maybe came across the land bridge at some point. Maybe related to Blackie. I don't know. I definitely think it's flesh and blood.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. It's so hard to say what it is, but I tend to agree with you on that. You know, I think it's flesh and blood, and people need to be aware when they're out there because, you know, there's always been this, for the longest time, ever since the Patterson-Gimlin film came out, I've noticed people would talk about them as being, you know, the friendly forest giant. And I can tell you that's not always the case. Now, are they always godless killing machines ready to slaughter anyone they get their hands on? I don't believe that. But I think that if you do cross one on a bad day, they, you know, just like a cougar, just like a bear, just like anything else, they're going to come and teach you a lesson.
Yeah, up until your show, I mean, I was of that mindset. You know, I never thought, I thought they were big and, you know, ominous looking, but I never knew of the propensity for violence and things like that. I mean, obviously a wild animal, but I'll tell you what, after listening to your show and some of the encounters, I definitely checked my six a whole lot more than I did before, and I'm thinking about upgrading my side cannon from a 40 to something else. Not that I, want to shoot one or even want to see one, but I'll be honest, I'm concerned. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be thinking about it when I'm out on my next hunt.
Well, stay in contact with me, will you? And let me know if you come across anything else strange. I mean, even if it's strange lights. I don't know how much time you have. I know you're working right now, and we can go into this another time. But when you're a game warden, Sasquatch related or not, what's like the weirdest thing you ran into while you were out there?
Probably not for your podcast. I mean, if you want me to tell you what the strangest thing I actually ran into, I can tell you. But there's a guy, this guy had hollowed out a garbage can, filled it with styrofoam, drilled a hole in it, wedged it between his truck tire, and was proceeding to have at the garbage can hole.
And was proceeding to do what?
He was screwing the garbage can that was wedged between his tire and his truck fender flare.
Wow.
A lot of stuff crazy like that. I was on a night flight one night, and I'd gotten called away for a possible spotlighter. And when I returned to where I was sitting, I parked, and there was some wires going up from underneath my truck. So I thought, man, maybe someone put a bomb down here or something. Someone had put a butt plug there. So I don't know if I scared them off. They had pulled in there and took off when I was coming up the hill, but there was a butt plug that was still vibrating on the ground underneath my truck. And I'm out in the middle of sticks. Most of the stuff is like weird stuff is sexually related. I did have an experience up in, I was near an Indian burial ground, and we were doing a night flight as well. And I started hearing things. I was seeing like shadows move from rock to rock. I kind of got freaked out on that. That one was a little creepy. I was thinking I was hearing like whispers and voices in distance. That was pretty freaky.
You never know what you're going to run out there. I always tell people, it's, I think a lot of people, because they don't go too much into the paranormal on the show, they think I don't believe in it. But that's anything beyond what I actually believe. I do believe that goes on. Mm-hmm. And I think it's sometimes in those areas, beyond even just paranormal stuff, you run into crazy nut jobs. I mean, who screws a garbage can in the middle of the, you know what I mean? That's automatic handcuffs, and let's do a drug test on you real quick and just see what's in your system. Yeah, I would imagine you run into some of those types. And the other thing too is, I've come across poachers in the woods, and I thought, thank God I'm not a game warden, because I kind of think these guys might kill a game warden if they come across one. So you just never know who you run into. And it's like I used to always tell my kids, the type of person you run into at 1 o'clock in the afternoon is completely different than the type of person you'll run into at 1 a.m., night and day, for whatever reason. And so, out there in the woods, you just never know what you're going to run into or what you're going to...
That's a chess match. And I'll be honest, my time as a game warden was much more airy than even, my years on SWAT, the sniper. I've never done anything here that is as hinky as be a warden, because you're in the middle of the sticks at night. No one knows where you're at. Back in the old days, I was down in Rancho Cucamonga, and on the weekends and after 5, I would talk to Sacramento, would be my dispatch. And so I would say, 5311, I'll be out with 5 subjects with rifles at this location. And the dispatch would come back and say, 10-4, what county is that in? So there's no help. There's no cavalry. You're it.
Yeah, you're on your own. Yeah.
Yeah. So your officer safety and your ability to read people and figure out what's up, you either evolve or you die.
Well, thank you for your service, and thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing it. It's I'd love to sit down with a beer with you sometime and just talk about some of the different things you run into out there, beyond Sasquatch. And that's a warning I always give people, it's go out armed. Just because you never know who you're going to run into, you never know what you're going to run into, especially out in those woods. And you know this firsthand. You're out there. You're on your own. I mean, most of the places I go, there is no cell phone service. There is no 911. So you come across some crazy guy, it could potentially be a battle out there in the woods, and no one's going to know about it for a couple hours.
Oh, there's predators, just like in the animal kingdom, and obviously we're animals too, but there are absolutely predators that look for those type of situations, that run those back roads, that are waiting for that broken down, girl or guy or whatever, and just are deviants. I mean, there are very sick people in this world, and they're just waiting for that opportunity. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I pack no matter where I go, because I don't want to have and not so much for myself, but for the protection of others. I don't want to have to say that, I was at the mall or wherever where, 30 people got shot up, but I was too lazy to bring my gun. So, I had to stand there and watch versus stop it. So for me, that's the motivation.
Yeah. Well, definitely. And keep in touch with me on the show, and let me know if you ever do come across anything in the future just when you're out, or if you get an interesting call, let me know, will you? I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, no problem. I'll reach out to some Hale guys and see if I can't get them to give something up.
I appreciate that, man. Thanks so much, Dan, for coming on.
All right, Wes.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email, wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Please go check out the website, become a member, sasquatchchronicles.com. You get additional shows, and look for merchandise right around the beginning of September. Have a good night, everyone. I'll see you next time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. I have 2 guests coming up. My first guest is a professional bass fisherman who had a very interesting encounter while he was out fishing, kind of a very aggressive encounter. I've heard a lot of Native Americans share this type of encounter. I'm really happy to invite Ronnie to the show. And then my second guest, Gary, will be sharing his own personal encounters and also talk about an encounter that happened to his wife recently that really terrified her. She got kind of herded into an area. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Ronnie to the show. Ronnie, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
As you and I were talking the other night, you didn't really buy into the Bigfoot thing. And I like that about your story. And I like that about, you as being an outdoorsman and having this experience. But if you would, for the audience, just kind of start from the beginning. Tell them what you were out doing, and then if you would, just kind of walk them into the encounter.
Okay, I will. I live in the state of South Carolina. And like I was telling Wes the other night on the phone call, the conversation we had, you just don't think of Bigfoots or Sasquatches in South Carolina or in the southeastern. Well, I don't. I'm not saying I didn't believe in it. I just had no interest. Yes, I've seen the Patterson and Gimlin film. If you have walked on this earth, I'm pretty sure most people have seen that film. I'm pretty sure they have, and I think a lot of people have seen in the news and the, Animal Planet and other things that's going on out there of all the shows that's about Bigfoot and Sasquatch. So you more or less, if you have not lived on planet Earth, then you probably don't know about the topic of Sasquatch or Bigfoot. But, in that sense, that was about as far as I took it. I knew about it. I'm not saying I didn't believe it. I'm one of them type of people. You got to show it to me, put it in my hand. My parents or my dad, we were Southern gentlemen, and we grew up like on a farm. And my dad always told me, son, believe half of what you see and nothing of what you hear. So I kind of grew up in that lifestyle, not believing, anything anybody tells me. But if somebody says, hey, I seen a Bigfoot or a Tupachaga or whatever they might have seen, or ghost, well, okay, I'm glad you've seen it. I'm not going to call you a liar, but come on. To me, it's got to happen to me, more or less.
No, I understand that.
All right, so what happened was I fish bass tournaments. I'm a very advocate bass fisherman. I love it. I live for it. And what happens on bass fishing tournaments or bass fishing guys, we fish the lakes all over the country, more or less. But in a geographic area, if I'm going to fish a new lake, I'm going to practice that lake for 2 or 3 days or maybe a couple weeks. Well, this particular lake is Clark Hill Lake, right above the Augusta, Georgia. And Augusta, like I said, Augusta, Georgia is a city, but right above or the outside of Augusta, Georgia, there's hardly nothing there. Just kind of picture everything like this. South of Augusta, right across the Georgia line, and it's right on the Georgia-South Carolina border, the Savannah River splits the states, okay? Right below the Augusta, Georgia area, there's a place called Savannah Riverside. It's a nuclear facility. It's 300 to 400 square miles of nothing but forest and woods and a couple little plants that's scattered here and there in the middle. All right, go a step further, north of Augusta, between Savannah, on the Savannah River, between Augusta, all the way up till you get up into South Carolina, up around Anderson and Spartanburg, up there, you're talking another 800, 900 square miles of nothing but spatted houses here and there, but no towns. If it is a town, it's very small. So you're looking at hardly no area up there for a lot of growth. But in my mind, seeing a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch just wasn't a part of me. And I'm going to go back to how it happened. That morning, right before daybreak, I launched a boat in Clark Hill Lake, and I'm running up the river. And then just picture this again. I'm running up the Savannah River, which is also, Clark Hill Lake. So I'm going up the Savannah River or Clark Hill, heading north, and I'm running 70, 75 miles an hour before daybreak, and I'm heading up that river. All right. Now, once you get to a bridge, is what we call no wake zone. You have to slow down and go under the bridge. All right. So I finally reached 378 Bridge, which crosses the Clark Hill Lake from South Carolina to Georgia, or Georgia's from South Carolina. It runs across the whole lake. All right, I'm at the no wake zone. I slow down, and I'm going under the bridge. And then after you pass, and the reason I'm telling you about the bridge is because after you pass that 378 Bridge, on really both sides of the lake, you hardly see nothing. Maybe the first quarter of a mile on the left-hand side, you'll see a little bit on the Georgia side. When you first pass that bridge, but on the South Carolina side, there is nothing but woods. As a matter of fact, from there all the way to Lake B. Russell Lake, is a dam. All the way to that dam, you don't see the first house on the right, on the lake. Now, and I know that's hard to a lot of people understand. And on the Savannah River, you have Lake Hartwell, which is the first lake at the top of South Carolina and Georgia. Then you got Lake B. Russell, which is the newer lake, and then you got Clark Hill, which is the lake at the bottom near Augusta, Georgia. That's all on the Savannah River. That all splits South Carolina and Georgia. Well, them three lakes back to back each other by their dams. All right. Now, from, like I said, the 378 bridge all the way to where I'm going, there is no houses. Now, on the South Carolina side, this is called game management land. And this all happened around April. Hunting season is not in. On game management land on the South Carolina, you shouldn't even be in the woods, period. The game warden shouldn't catch you in the woods on game management land, not hunting season. All right? So it's still dark. It's about 5:30 right now, and I'm just past the 378 bridge, and I'm heading to a fishing spot with my fishing partner. He does not want to give his name. Matter of fact, he don't even want to talk about it. He don't even want to express. He don't even want to talk about it to me. To this day, he don't even talk about it. So me and him head on up, and I'm traveling. I don't know how far I go, but it's pretty long ways. Think about this. I'm running 70 miles an hour past the 378 bridge, and I'm probably running 20 minutes. So that tells you I'm pretty far up in there. All right. Now, remember, I hadn't passed the house, and all game management land. And another thing, this game management land on the South Carolina side is almost 400 square miles. You're talking a lot of land that's nothing there but woods. And I'm not talking flat land. It's hilly. It's like, it's kind of, when you get to this area, it's kind of like the foothills of the mountains, but it's pretty hilly. So I'm going up to a spot a friend of mine told me about in a cove that they've been schooling up there, and he's caught a few up there many years ago. He hadn't been in a long time, but he told me a spot, so that's where I'm headed to. I pulled into this cove to the right on the South Carolina side, and everything around me, all the land around me right now is all game management land. All right, and it has been for 20 minutes, me riding 70 miles an hour in my boat. All right, so I get up there, put the trolling motor down, I get in the front of the boat, partner gets in the back, and he starts fishing, and I start fishing. Now, we maybe 45 to 50 yards from the bank, okay? And to paint you a picture of what I'm looking at, I'm going down the bank, heading into the cove. Now, I'm already into the cove, but we're heading into the back of the cove. And this cove goes a long way in there. I say maybe a half a mile in there. The cove comes in and then comes back out to the main lake. So I'm into this cove, and on the bank is an incline. And I'm talking a pretty good incline. I imagine from the water level to the top of the incline is probably 20 feet up, and I'm talking maybe a 35 to 40 degree incline. So we're going along that bank, and we're casting, and I'm casting to the bank. Right now, the sun's barely coming up over the tree, barely coming up, not even at the treetop level, barely coming up where you're getting some light now. Good enough, put it good enough where you can throw your lure and watch it actually hit the water close to the bank and reel it in. And that's what we were doing. We were going down the bank. Well, all of a sudden, I smelled, I'm not saying it was Sasquatch, but it was a bad smell. It was just, it looked like to me it was a wet dog, and he hadn't had a home, and he's been out in the woods for years, and it was just rotten. But we went past that, and I said to my partner, and we'll use his name. Let's call him Tom. I said, Tom. I said, do you smell it? He said, yeah, Ronnie, it's rotten. I said, yeah, I know, it's just bad.
Let me ask you, Ronnie, what did you think that smell was?
I actually thought it was a dead deer. I thought either it was I thought it was a dead deer that got killed a week, maybe 3 or 4 days ahead of time, and that's what I thought it was. I thought it was a dead deer. Just
kind of cooking in the sun and been out there for a while. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. That or a bunch of catfish or something that floated up, I really didn't take a lot of notice of what. If I had to guess, I would think it was a dead deer, and that's probably what came to my mind. And anyway, so we started back, and we got past that smell, but it never went away. It was still lingering, but never went away at that one place where it was stronger. And we're casting. Of course, that's not going to stop us from fishing. And by that time, I had a bite. He caught one, and all of a sudden, when he caught the fish and brought it into the boat, and right when he went to release it, I heard footsteps. And I'm not talking about somebody walking in the woods or four-legged creature. I'm talking about actually right, left. And I'm also not talking about some guy that's 100 pounds. Now, I told Tom, I said, Tom, do you hear that? He said, yeah, I hear it. I said, there's nobody supposed to be in these woods, and I don't know nobody who lives up here. He said, no, this ain't hunting season. I said, well, I don't know what it is. I said, if you think it's kids? I said, not no 6 o'clock in the morning ain't going to be no kids out here. And then all of a sudden it stopped. And here's where it gets a little crazy for me. It stopped in 5 minutes. It kind of not really got away from it. I'm still wondering what was making that sound up there, up on the incline. All of a sudden a rock comes over and hits the water. And I'm talking, it was probably about the size of a softball. I looked at Tom. Tom looked at me. I said, what in the world? Who's throwing rocks at us? He said, you think we done made somebody mad coming in their fishing spot? I said, no, I don't think so. I threw my rod out, and then another one comes over, about the same size. And then another one comes over, and this one wasn't the same size. Here's what kind of changed my mind of what's throwing something that can throw something this big. I'm talking, this rock, if you took 2 basketballs and put them together, that's how big this rock. You're talking 350-pound rock probably. And it come hurling over. The first one, this was the first one. It was a series of 2. The first one, and this one hit right behind the boat in the corner of the motor in the back and caused a little bit of ripple, a pretty good ripple. And I said, Tom, I'm ready to go. I said, I don't know what that is, but I am ready to get out of here. Well, as soon as I said that, here comes the other one. And it lands probably 5 to 7 feet from where I'm standing on the front of my boat facing the bank. It lands right in front of me, enough where the splash wet me. I got wet from it. And when I got wet, I can hear it hit the bottom of the lake. And where the other gravel, it was on the gravel bank kind of, and I heard it hit, bam, on the bottom of the lake. I turned around, I said, you can stay here and fish all you want, but I'm gone. I turned my boat around, and when I turned my boat around to head out the cove, I heard, now think about it, I got my motor on, and of course, it's not the old style motor, it's a 4-stroke Yamaha show motor, and you can run it wide open, and me and you can talk just like we are right now. And anyway, I cranked my motor up, and I started when I turned around and started to hit the pedal to it, and when I got on it, I can hear it to the left side running down the bank with parallel to my boat until I got out of that cove.
Jeez.
Now, Wes, I don't know if it was, I can't tell you if it was a Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Goat Man. I just can't tell you what it is. I do know this. For a fact, there is nobody in them woods on game management land, unless it's the game warden. And I don't think the game warden be throwing rocks at my boat. It was whatever it was mad. It was mad for me being there. It didn't want me to be there, and it wanted me out of that area. To this day, I haven't fished that spot again. Matter of fact, I hadn't even went to that side of the lake, in that vicinity of the lake.
What did you think when you saw the softball-sized rocks? And it sounds like all of this kind of happened really fast, but did you call out and yell at? Did you think it was a person throwing rocks?
Oh, yeah, I yelled. I said, hey, this is exactly what I said, Wes. I said, hey, you got people down here fishing. You like to hit us. Stop. Or something to that figure. And then Tom, he also yells. No response. None whatsoever. I wish the incline wasn't so bad where I can see what was doing it. What I should have done, I didn't think about it at the time. Wes, you don't think about these things till later. I look back and I should have done this, should have done that. You just don't think about it. I started backing. What I should have done is back the boat up with a trolling motor so I can see over it, and I just didn't think about it.
No, I don't blame you. I think most people probably would have turned and left. It's interesting, the boulders it was throwing. And, even, and I'm a pretty big guy, even standing on the bank, I don't know that I could throw something that heavy, even if it was someone was 10, 15, 20 yards off the bank. And I realize you guys are probably farther out, but, I don't even know if I could throw something that far off the bank, let alone standing up on the ridgeline and throwing it towards your boat. I mean, that would have been the cue right there. Okay, that's probably not, that's probably not a person. It would have scared me is what I'm saying. I would have done the same thing.
I was about 50 yards from the bank. I even thought about this, after the incident happened. I said, I wonder if somebody can throw something on that incline like that. But here's the thing. On the incline, they were either far enough back from the incline where you couldn't see them. And I'm not talking about rolling off the incline. I'm talking about going through you can hear it. The last one I seen it come through the trees. I'm talking about come through the tree, where I can see like 4 or 5 trees back on the incline, come through the tree up, it looked like it was 40, I'm looking up now, on the incline, like 40 feet, and it's coming. And here it's coming towards my thing. And all of a sudden, it hit right, 5. So I'm thinking that thing's throwing it. If you look at where he was at or where it was at and where my boat position was, 65, 70 yards, and show me any person that can throw basketball-sized rock 70 yards. Show me anybody who can do that. I think we need them in the Olympics. That just happened.
I think you're right. And one of those big boulders would have hit you. I mean, it could potentially kill you coming down like that. I mean, that's a missile coming at you. As you're leaving this place, you hear this thing running down the bank as you're taking off. What's going through your mind at this point?
I thought we'd made someone something very, very mad, and it didn't want me there. And I was ready to leave. Matter of fact, Wes, I didn't tell you this on the call. I just didn't think about it when we did the talk the other day. We left the lake. We didn't fish no more. We left. We put it on the trailer and left. And the only thing I was telling Tom, matter of fact, we didn't talk from the only time that me and him talked again is when we got to 378 bridge. And like I said, it's no wake zone, so we have to slow down. And we slowed down then, and me and him talked then, and the first thing out of Tom's mouth was, what do you think that was? And this is what I told him. I said, Tom, I never hardly believe in any creature in the woods that's like two-legged, unless it is a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I know that's kind of crazy talk, but I became not such a more believer, but I know now for a fact that whatever was throwing at us wasn't no ghost or apparition or somebody that's, a 200 or 300 pound man. It was something in that woods that threw something at us that didn't want us there. And I can't tell you 100% because I didn't see it with my own 2 eyes. But if I was a betting man, I would put all my stakes it was Sasquatch or Bigfoot that was doing that day. And that's what I told Tom. I told him the same thing, and he agreed. And that's the last time that him and I ever really discussed it. He don't want to talk about it. He just doesn't. I know this. He said it too. He's never fished that area ever again either.
Did you guys hear any vocalizations, or did it make any sound besides just throwing rocks at you guys?
I don't. I wish I can go back and pay attention more. It might have did when we first pulled in there, when we first came in. I thought I heard, this is what I will tell you this. I thought I heard like like that when we first pulled in to start fishing, but I thought I just brushed it off as deer. I mean, I hear that all the time, but it was deeper than deer. It was a lot deeper. It was a different sound, but I just brushed it off. When we first pulled in, I thought I heard that. I didn't even ask Tom about it, but I'm not 100% because you look back, and people tell these, what happened to them. You can't remember everything, but I thought I did. I'm not going to say 100%, but I thought I did, Wes. I thought I did hear like a very deep, like that, like a deer in rut.
Yeah, it's interesting as you and I were talking. I mean, a lot of fishermen, I mainly hear it from a lot of Native Americans, but they'll talk about pulling into certain areas and getting rocks thrown at them or getting large sticks or branches thrown at them as they pull into an area to fish. And that's very primate-like behavior, almost a frustration, like, get out of here. Did you talk to anyone about the encounter afterwards?
About 3 months afterwards, we was at I was at my bass club. We're a member of a club, and it's a bunch of guys, become a bass tournament club. And what we do is we get around once a month, and we have a meeting every month, and we're going to see what lake we're going to fish. with a club tournament. We fish one club tournament a month, and then we help out organizations. And, you know, like last year, we were sponsoring Boy Scouts of America and did a tournament for them. Well, the reason why I didn't talk to nobody at the club for 3 months, because I didn't go to the 2 meetings. In the 3rd meeting, it was around July, so it was about 3 months afterwards. Might have been a meeting in June. But I was in there, it was just a bunch of us talking, and I would just tell them, have they ever fished that area up there? And some of them said, yeah, I fish it sometimes. And I said, well, let me tell you what happened to me. I said, I don't know what it was. It's just something you don't go around doing, telling people that you might have seen Bigfoot, especially down here in the South. But anyway, I asked, my members, my fellow guys, and one of them stood up and said, Ronnie, I tell you what happened to me back in the late 70s, and I'll tell you when we get done here. So after the meet was over, me and him was talking, and he said, and this is a lot older gentleman, and trust me, this guy, the one that does our prayers for the meet and stuff, so he's not going to tell somebody. He has no reason to tell me a field. There's no reason to tell me something that's not true. So he says in the 70s, he was in his John boat, and you got a picture of a 14-foot John boat with a 25 horse engine on the back. It'll run about 30 miles an hour, and he just what he told me. He said, just dust dark, the sun done went over the lake, and he still had a little bit of light, but not a lot. He said, I was running up the lake, and he said it was calm. The water was just like ice. And when I got to where you say that happened, the next cove up, when I come out of that cove and headed up towards the Lake B. Russell Dam, there's a long stretch there of bank, and he said it's probably 300 yards long. He said, I was probably 200 yards, maybe 150 yards from the bank, and this 2-legged animal, and I said, animal? He said, yeah, I'm telling you, it was an animal. It wasn't a person, it was an animal. He said, because it was huge. He said, Ronnie, at the time I said it was 500-600 pounds. He said, it was outrunning me in my boat at 30 miles an hour. Outrunning me. And I don't know if I can run 30 miles an hour. He said it was on 2 feet, and it was running down that bank, paralleling me. He said, I don't know if it paid me any attention. I don't know if it did or not, but it was paralleling me on that bank. He said, because when I seen it dart off to the woods at a 45-degree angle from the nose of my boat headed up that way. He said, at that time, I turned around and went the opposite way. When it darted off to the woods, I went the opposite way, because where it darted off to the woods was where I was going to go fishing on the other side, back side of that cove. And he said, I wasn't going in there with that creature or animal, whatever was in there. He said, I told people that all the time, what happened to me there, and he's heard stories himself, that particular area, that sightings go all the way back, into the 1800s, that area. But, he told me that happened to him in the 70s. And I know, like I was telling Wes, I never researched it, never looked at it, didn't watch the shows. Like I told you, the Patterson-Gimlin film, everybody's seen it. If you hadn't seen it, that means you hadn't been living on planet Earth. But
right.
You start looking at things, and you start researching, not a lot of research, just looking it up, when you've got a spare moment. I looked up the BFRO sightings report for South Carolina and Georgia, and I found a few of them in the Fort Gordon area, which is another area right next to Augusta that's nothing but woods, that they've had a few sightings in it. I've also seen them where they had sightings in Greenwood, Greenville, and that area, which is right where I'm talking about, because that you're only talking 100 miles, maybe 75 with a rooster, with a bird flies from where the location I happened. If it would have been a person throwing them boulders, then like I said, they should have been in the Olympics 2 weeks ago. We would have won everything in the track and field if it was a creature, because if it can throw rocks that big, I can only imagine how fast it can run.
Yeah, that's interesting that he called it an animal. He said it was 500-600 pounds, and it was, 30 miles an hour. 70s really hauling, but even 30 miles an hour, you're hauling butt in a boat. And usually along riverbanks, and I don't know how it is out there exactly where you're talking about, but I can imagine there's probably a lot of brush, and you just can't, a person just can't run down the bank like that. I mean, you're going to be running at like 2 miles an hour because you're going to be stopping at every little bush, everything in your way. And that's amazing that this thing was able to keep up with his boat. Did he tell you what he thought it was?
Oh, he definitely said it was a Bigfoot. He said, there's no doubt in my mind. He said, I've been hearing stories all my life. He said, this is definitely a Bigfoot. Now, this is a dairy farmer. See, he grew up on a dairy farm. So, I mean, we've all, listen, where we live at, if you ain't hunting and fishing, then you ain't a man in this area. That's just how we are here.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things in that area that a lot of people don't talk about. And I've noticed that from that area. I think there's a lot more encounters that happen in that specific region, but people are funny about it in that area. They just don't talk about it. They just don't want to. Generally, you almost have to pull. It's like pulling teeth to get them to talk about what they've seen or what they've experienced. You said you had another story, a second one?
Well, it didn't happen to me, but like I said, a bunch of guys in Fort Gordon military had a scout. They were going out that night scouting, and the whole platoon seen this creature stood up, and it was over 9 feet tall. You can go to BFRO and read it. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's there. But that's right down from where it happened. It ain't that's where the bird flies. You're talking 20 miles, okay? The only other one I know of, Wes, that I've heard, from other people was that story, and the few other ones that I heard that a lot of people has had stuff moved or misplaced during hunting season. Now, what I mean by misplaced, you don't mess with somebody's deer stand on game management land. You just don't do it. Matter of fact, a lot of game management land, you got to take your deer stand in and then take it out with you. But on occasion, I imagine people leave them in there tied up to the tree or whatever. But I've heard of cases where the deer stand's been, broken up, bent all up, and you think about it. If you're gonna hold a 300-pound man, climb up, or 200-pound man, or a lady that's 100-something pounds up in a tree to go hunting, deer hunting, it's got to be a pretty good piece of metal there. It's not going to be something that you can bend easily. But I've heard of stories like that. Matter of fact, I've heard one almost about 5 years ago. It might have been a little longer, but somewhere in there, the deer stand was wrapped around a tree like a pretzel. Now, show me a person that can do that. But you don't really, here's my thing. If I don't see it, I can't say 100% that it's there. But I will tell people this. If you have seen a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot before this incident would have happened, I would oblige. I would have said, yes, I like your story. In the back of my mind, it would be hard for me to believe you. Now, I would believe you 100%. No. I tell people now, do you believe in Sasquatch? I said, no, I don't. I know they're real. I'm not a believer. There's no such thing as a believer. That's like saying, do you believe in dogs? Well, yeah, I believe in dogs. No, I know they're dogs.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not a believer now. I know they're there. There's got to be. There's no way something can do what it did and scare me. And I'm 6'3", 200-something pounds. I'm not somebody that's easily scared. And I'm not. Listen, I own my own company. I'm not some loony person that, telling this fable. I own my own company. I was an engineer with chemicals. So I'm not somebody that just called in and say, hey, I seen a Bigfoot throwing rocks at me, skipping rocks across the water. No, that's not what happened to me. It scared me. I don't think it scared me as much as it scared Tom. What I didn't like is the unknown, not knowing. Oh, I wished I'd go back now. I would back that boat up where I could actually see what was thrown at me. But I know for a fact that something that can throw a projectile like it threw at me, I don't want to run up with it in the woods.
Again, if you don't believe in Bigfoot, for an outdoorsman, bears don't throw rocks. A person couldn't have thrown that boulder the distance it was throwing it, and then run along and start following you down the embankment. Now, when it was going, I wanted to ask you, when you were going down the embankment, were you able to see anything, or was it more or less you were hearing it?
It was all, like I said, it's an incline, it's an uphill there, and it was off, probably, I'm just saying, and I'm speculating, it was probably, I know I couldn't see it because it was off in the tree line, so you're talking, the way it sounded to me, it was probably 30 yards inside the tree. And listen, we're not talking about a pine forest here. We're talking about woods. I'm talking about growth. You got to think about it. This is game management land. There's no cutting nothing in down. This wood's never been harvested. So you're talking 400 square miles of real underbrush, woods. I would speculate, I know for a fact you can't see 20 yards. If you're standing right inside this forest, you can't see 20 yards unless you get into some area that, over time, some things, the trees is dead and fell over, but it's that thick. But here's what got me, though, when I was leaving. For it to run like it was, it had to know real good because you're running in thick stuff in there. But it was the sound. All right, I tell people this. You go outside and you tell a friend of yours, neighbor, whoever, to go, I don't know, 100, say 75 yards from you to the side, and tell that person to run. Better yet, do it in the woods so you can hear it crumbling. Go 75 yards from you and run parallel to you and see how good you can hear that sound. Barely, I bet you can hear it, but you just barely hear it. I'm talking boom, 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 boom. It was that loud. You can tell it was hitting hard, whatever I heard. But I didn't hear it long though, Wes. I didn't hear it long. You're talking maybe 20 seconds because, like I said, by the time my boat, when I hit the hammer down, it lifted up, got on plane, and I was gone.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I would have been too. And that's the thing, sometimes with these things, they do these territorial displays where they'll throw stuff at you, or if you're on land, they'll growl at you or they'll bluff charge you. But it's interesting to hear it from a fisherman. Like I said, I've heard it from a lot of Native Americans. There's a place in Oregon where Native Americans have told me they've gone before, and they get rocks thrown at them. They get boulders thrown at them. They'll never go back to that spot. It just terrifies them. And I would imagine that's kind of how, you and Tom felt, leaving the area. Like, let's not go back. And what else could it be? What else could it be?
Here's my thing with what else could it be throwing something at? Show me a human that can do that. I mean, or anything. A bear don't have hands. Now, here's why I say this is if it would have been a rock that was pushed over the side and rolled down and fell into the water, that's a totally different situation.
Yeah, when you're seeing them come over the trees and come in your general direction, like it's been in a catapult, something's tossing it.
Now, speaking of that, now, if it was somebody, that built a catapult, and got the okay from game management and game wars to build a big, huge catapult out there in the woods, yeah, that's possible. That's about the only thing I could say that would compare. I'm glad you mentioned that could compare to what happened to us. But I'm pretty sure the game war is not going to let somebody go out there and build a catapult on their land.
No, and they're not going to be out there at 6 o'clock in the morning just to mess with fish.
No.
And sometimes, a lot of fishermen are armed. So you start doing that, and, you never know. Some guy might pull a gun out, start firing up in your general direction, even if it was small rocks being thrown at you. And it's like you might have thought, well, it might have been a person. I don't realize that's not the situation. But even a lot of fishermen have guns, and I can imagine.
I got one of mine.
Piss off the wrong person. They start shooting at you.
Well, why most fishermen got guns in the boats? Because of the water mosquitoes. Man, we have got so many poison water snakes around here.
Yeah. Well, Ronnie, I sure appreciate you coming on the show and sharing it. I thought it was some of the most interesting encounters are the encounters where people don't see the creature, but there really is no other explanation. And I think in your situation, it really does fall into the category of Sasquatch. The rocks are too large. Some of the vocalizations that you heard, the smell that you smelled, it all kind of fits into a Sasquatch encounter. Yeah. Do you ever think about going back to that area?
No. No. Here's my. I mean, I probably would eventually. Yeah, eventually go back. I wasn't in that area. I probably would have done it this year, but the reason why was I had a lot of stuff going on with work, so I didn't. I did not fish a lot of tournaments back in the spring because the area there, just like bass fishermen, we got specific areas or specific places on lake that we fish during different seasons. Lake might be deep. I mean, the bass might be deep. They might be shallow. They might be bedding. They off bedding, postpone, pre-spawn. So that area is good in the spring. And I just wasn't up on the lake this year. I will next year. I'll be in that vicinity. But I will this. I did buy me a GoPro and let it happen this time, and I'll have a picture. It won't be one of these fuzzy pictures that you see on all these cameras. It will be a clear picture.
Yeah, well, be careful if you go back. Like I said, 50-pound boulder coming your way, especially when you're out there on a boat, could be tragic really quick. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, very quick. I mean, not only if it had hit my boat, it would have hurt my feelings because it hit my boat. And it could, like you said, it could have hit me or Tom. It wasn't a good situation to be in. That's why I said it was time for us to leave.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, sir. I appreciate you sharing it.
I appreciate it, Wes. Thank you.
Next up, I want to welcome Gary to the show. Gary, thanks for taking the time to come on the show. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Appreciate what you do for everybody out there.
Thanks, man. I do appreciate it, and I know. But if you would, I'll let you take it away. Tell us what you were out doing, and then if you would, just walk us into what happened.
Okay. It actually started off a couple of weeks prior to that. My wife and I were up camping, and we had invited some friends of hers up and mine as well. And we decided to go out and said, hey, why don't we go up and see if we can find some deer prints because we're leading into deer season. So we went up to a place called Beanville Meadows up US 50. And we had stopped up there, got out, and he and I walked out to the overlooking I-80 and the river below. And as we were walking back, I stopped and I looked down and I see a bare footprint that's about 14 to 15 inches long. And he says, what are you looking at? And I'm looking forward and back to see if there's another print, a left print. And the ground was, it was middle of July, so the ground's really hard. And this print was just slightly visible, maybe 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch in depth. And he saw that, and about the time the girls started blowing the horn, we took off. We never went back, even though I offered to go call everybody and have them bring firearms up and go back and check it out. He wasn't interested in doing that. But I talked him into going back out and going bird hunting with me. It was a couple of weeks before deer season. And he says, who's going with us? And I said, just you and I. And he said, no, at first. And I talked him into it. I said, we won't go up on the top of the ridge. We'll stay down here near the campground. So we did, but that didn't help. We were had driven down this, across the side of the ridge and then downhill, and then made a left turn and came back, was heading back toward the campground. I saw some mud, and I said, oh, Rob, there's some mud. And he goes, good, hit it. Come sliding around the corner, and at that time, I don't know if we broke the left or right front axle then, or if it had already been broken from another outing that we had and just didn't know it. Buried the back end of the Jeep, got out of the Jeep, locked the hubs, tried to get out to no avail. The front end wasn't doing anything. Then commenced to get out shovels and jack and everything to extract the vehicle. And as I walked around to the passenger side, I heard a boisterous, what I thought sounded like a laugh, kind of like a cross between a hyena and a person. Later to find out on Bigfoot Sounds of Oregon that it's the second one that they have that they actually call it a growl, and it's the closest thing. I can't mimic that voice. It rattles in your being when you hear it.
Was the sound that you heard, was it anything like this?
About 11 p.m. I'm a couple hundred feet from my house, and you hear it going off in the background right now. Kind of sounds weird. Kind of sounds doggish, hyena-ish, but you can hear it going off in the background right now. It's really kind of strange, just to say the least. It's been going off for about 15-20 minutes so far by the fire station. And it's pretty crazy, so if you can listen, that'd be crazy. Hold on.
No, it's kind of breaking up, but that sounds more like a screaming sound. Like I said, the only thing I've heard close, with the exception of the monkey chatter at the end, is the second one on Oregon's Bigfoot Sounds.
And what did you think it was when it was making that noise?
Oh, I was, like I said, at first, you have an embarrassing moment. You've just buried your Jeep, and then when I hear the sound, I'm like, well, yeah, ha, that's really funny. Now you can come help us get this thing out. But then, reality sets in, and you're like, that's way too loud. That's not a person. And then, of course, you turn around and look, and you don't see anything. So, it's right at the edge of the tree line at that time. So it's stepped back. It's probably playing its little, hide and seek game. Didn't see it. My friend Rob, he starts jacking shells and all the high base shotgun shells he could find. So that's all we had. And he hands me my shotgun. I said, let's go see what this is. And he goes, just not the same words he used. And he didn't cuss, but he was letting me know he wasn't having any part of that. And he said, no, thank you. I took off running. It took off running up through the trees. This stand is really thick of small trees. It's crashing. I'm running on a dirt road next to the stand of trees, and I can't keep up with it. And I'm hoping as the road comes up and turns to the right that I'm going to catch sight of it. And last thing I hear, I'm 10 feet short. I hear boom as it breaks through the trees, and boom on the middle of the road, and boom off the other side of the road, and then back into the next stand of trees, and it's crashing. Then I hear it slowing down, and now I'm thinking, now it's stopped. This isn't the smartest thing I've ever done. I'm probably 75 feet up from the Jeep now, and, essentially by myself, and I start backing up, back all the way down the hill, and we spend the next 3 hours, or I do, trying to get out. Rob was scared to death, and rightfully so. Me, at that time, I was, more along the line of the flute player, gentle giant of the forest kind of thing. And, it's not going to hurt me, blah, blah, blah. But, and it didn't. I spent 3 hours digging the Jeep out. There was an underground spring under the road, and it was a daunting task. And he didn't move from the back of the Jeep. He stayed right there with all the rest of the shotguns and all the shells, and never moved from that position until we were ready to leave.
And did you guys have any more incidences before you left?
We did. Just before we left, there was a longer, slender pine tree that was more full, so it wasn't really like the pines that you normally see. It was more like somebody transplanted, something they'd pull out of the front of their house. So I would say about 2 hours and 45 minutes into this, all of a sudden, blast of doves take off out of this tree. We didn't have any idea they were there. They weren't cooing the whole time we were there. We heard nothing from them. And apparently, I would say it was working its way back down to get a better look, and it scared them up out of that tree. And yeah, I was just had us out and said, yeah, it's time to leave.
Some people have that view of these things to where they won't harm you, and sometimes I think that is the case, but not always, you know. If you're chasing it off with a gun, you're running it off, and then it comes back, that just shows you it is different than most wild animals. I mean, you run a bear off, and you'll probably never hear from it again. It'll be gone. You know, they don't generally come back. And so it didn't bother you at all. It doesn't sound like the incident really shook you at the time based on...
Yeah, at the time, the only part that shook me is when it slowed down to a stop. And then I'm like, it's not running anymore. So, you know, it's like you said, it's not a deer. Deer don't make that noise. It certainly isn't a bear. It doesn't make that noise either. And, you know, the fact that it's turned around or slowed down, it's not afraid of you.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. Now, you had an incident when you were hiking. Was this in the same general area?
No, actually, what we had done was after that weekend, we decided, my boss and I, to go to a higher elevation. So it was about 2 weeks later, we went up to, most people are familiar with Lover's Leap or Strawberry Canyon Trail between 50 and 880, goes over to Caples Lake.
I don't think we mentioned what state this happened in. What
this
state
is
did it happen?
This is in California.
California, okay.
This is just out of Sacramento. So we had gone up there and we started hunting this area. Everything seemed, just perfect. It's about 8,000 to 8,500 feet. It's closer to the Pacific Crest Trail, which was our boundary for our district at that time, or it was D5 that we were in. So we were pretty close to that. So we're up there in elevation. So we've gone from 4,000 feet on up to, 8,500, somewhere around there. And, it seemed like a nice place, camp next to the creek. Just a nice place. And spent a couple of weeks up there, and last time we were up there, my boss and I, made plans, and he said, well, where you found me over here, I'll be there. And I said, yeah, I found a big, large boulder over here with a tree behind it up on the side of the hill, expecting all the deer to be moving up the hill, and sat there for, 45 minutes to an hour on top of this. And to get onto this boulder, you had to go to the uphill side next to the tree and climb up the back side. The downhill side face is probably 12 feet down. I crawled up on top of the boulder, sitting up there with my gun, don't see any deer, no does, nothing. And I mentioned to him, I said, when we went out that morning, I'm like, look at all this grass was laid down in this one particular area. There's like a little stand of birch trees, and all this grass is all laid down. I said, man, it looks like somebody drove a herd down through here. Just, one of those things you don't ever see too much, especially since we didn't see cows up there anywhere. So I'm sitting up on the rock. Earlier he was at lunchtime. He was eating kipper snacks, and he's spilling oil on his pants. And this is what leads into, I'm sitting there on the rock, and I smell this faint, fishy smell, and I start chuckling to myself. Oh, yeah, funny, he's sneaking up on me. But at that time, all I smelled was just, hadn't heard anything, just a smell. And then I heard a step and crunch. And then, as everybody says, the wall of smell hit me. Literally smells like rotting salmon on the American River and a skunk crossed between the two of them. And at that point, I said, that's not Billy. And about that time, I heard a gun go off where he was supposedly hunting at. And I'm like, I have two choices. Go down the rock and face it, or go off the front, take a chance of breaking my leg and or shooting myself. I took going off the face, and I hit the ground running and didn't stop. Never been up there hunting since.
That'd be enough to get me out of there.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I like, that's not Billy, and that's not anything that walks on four legs.
You've heard the laughter out there before. Can you tell us about that and tell us what you heard and what you thought it was, or what was going through your mind when you heard it?
Based on the incidences that we had in that area, or I had in that area, and I forgot to tell you, my twin brother, his four-wheel drive club adopted that trail as their adopted trail. And they were up there closing it out for the winter that same year. And at the same time, there was a Caltrans group closing down the Caltrans station up there. And I believe it was a Sacramento Union that reported this, that they had actually, a couple of guys decided to stay up there and camp for the weekend. And as they were sitting there the very first night they were camping there, had a fire going, and they said within 20 yards of them, a Bigfoot, but from what I remember was it would have been a juvenile male walked right through their camp. If I remember, they had a pickup truck and they had a station wagon. They all four of them jumped in the pickup truck and hauled out of there, and this was at Caples Lake at the other end of the trail.
Sounds like there's a lot of activity in that whole area where you were hunting and where you guys hiked. And
my twin brother, when they went up there to close that trail out, and I think it was either the same weekend or a weekend apart, they were camping at the base of the trail, and they had their tents in a semicircle. Had a fire in the center, and he said they went to bed about 2 o'clock in the morning. And he said he goes in, his friend was already asleep in the tent, and he crawls in the tent with him, and said he laid there for about 15 minutes, maybe he's dozing off. And he said he heard something bound up to the front of his tent, pick up his backpack, and start rummaging through his backpack. And he says then it would bound off, and it'd be about another 15 minutes, and he's sitting there, like I did with the deal up sitting on a rock. It's my buddy messing with me, right? And he said the second time when it came in, it was taking a branch and was pushing a branch underneath the tent. And he says at this point, he said they couldn't have spent another 45 minutes sitting here, just to mess with me and that long pause, and and he says I don't think it's them. I said, well, why don't you grab the branch? He goes, at that point I was starting to get scared. And he said this went on until it would bound in and out. And then he said at one time, he said it sounded like it was pawing the side of the tent.
Did he notice anything missing in his backpack?
No, not that he didn't say anything that he did. But the one thing where he lost me with the whole story, I've heard the story several times, is he said that one time when it bounded out, he says he remembers seeing a piercing white light like the Coleman, not a Coleman lantern, not the normal white gas kind of lantern, the tube type lantern.
Right.
And he said he would see, almost like a vertical opening and see this light pop, and this thing would close back up. And I'm like, okay, you had me at Bigfoot. Now we're getting into, portals or flying saucers. I said, I'm not buying that.
No, and he was seeing the light through the tent, through the
right.
The material in the tent.
Yeah, he said he said he was too scared. He never looked outside. And he said it went on until like 4:30 in the morning. So based on all those things that have happened, I meet this guy at a gym down in Roseville. We befriended each other, and, I found out that, he believes in Bigfoot, and he's had lieutenants and stuff. By the way, he's a Leo, so I won't mention his name. So he and I and his friend Pat will carry the camera, and he works for the state of California. So that's all he carries is just a camera. So as we're going up through this same area, and this is the first place we went, was back up Highway 15, and we checked both the places. I tried to find out where I had gotten stuck with a Jeep. We made a wrong turn. We hiked around, said, well, enough of that, and we went on up to this place at Strawberry. And that was when we walked up through the canyon up there along that creek. And as we're going up, we can't see the creek. You can faintly hear it. We've already crossed over it, of course, but as we're going up in there, my buddy who's a law enforcement officer says, hey, come over here, check this out. And go over, and it's a big flat boulder, and it's got 3 rocks stacked on top of it. And I thought, well, that's strange, not unheard of. And another really weird thing is there's a sign on a tree up there that says, if you're working in this area, call this 800 number.
Did you ever call it, or?
No, never called it. I'm like, working? What do they mean working in the area? I'm not working in the area. I'm not calling it. I don't want to know who's on the other end. And I just find that kind of strange. I don't know if anybody's ever run across that. It's
interesting. So what did you guys do next?
We continued on our quest, but as we're going back there, and he called me over there to look, there was some greenery on the tree, and you couldn't see anywhere where it was broken from. When I say, and it's in small pieces, it's like somebody was sitting there just grabbing the ends of the tree limbs and breaking them off. There's not been any wind. And he goes, well, how fresh do you think it is? I said, well, pick it up and smell it. You tell me, how long do you think it's been there? And he goes, still smells pretty piney to me. We continued up the trail and started hearing what sounded like a child playing.
Now describe that to me. What do you mean a child playing?
Well, just like a mother and a baby playing.
Oh, I gotcha.
Like a mother sitting there, tickling the baby, and the baby's laughing, and, and so you're close to a stream, and we're thinking that, well, there's nobody up here. There's no cars, nobody's, left any tracks along the trail other than the bear and the deer, but, we're not seeing any footprints in there that were recent. So we have no reason to believe, as far as we've hiked in there, that, that anybody's back here, but we're going to go check it out anyway. And as we proceed further in, all of a sudden it stops. And it was getting late afternoon with the peaks on both sides of this. I said, it's going to be dark here pretty quick. We need to get moving out of here, and it, not because the sun's going down, but just because the sun's going down enough that the peaks in that canyon are going to black that canyon out. So as we turn around and start back out, first we heard, what might have been a rock clack, more like a slide, and somebody said, did you hear that? And, yeah, I heard that. And then we heard a whistle on the left side of us, and then a whistle on the right side of us, and we move out more, and then you hear another whistle on the left side, and it was like they were going back and forth, like, trying to mimic a bird. This is pretty weird.
Yeah, that is weird. That would bother me a lot, especially if you're trying to make your way out. I think hearing the woman and child would have bothered me if you would have known there was nothing down there. I'd have been trying to figure that out. But as you're coming out, so they're whistling, you hear rock clacks. Are they pacing you guys out?
Yeah. They're going at the same speed, and we're hearing the whistles exactly parallel with our, path out. And they went as far out as, when we got down to the creek and we're crossing the creek, you couldn't hear whistles anymore after that. And we still had quite a ways to hike from there because we had left the truck probably a couple miles out from that point. And we didn't hear anything past that. We went up there again, I want to say the following year, and didn't have the same instances happen. But, that's out looking for Bigfoot.
What happened to your wife, I think, would piss me off a little bit with these creatures. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. I work nights. She's trying to text me. And, of course, you just get a ping, so that doesn't wake me up. And finally, she couldn't get cell reception, and she finally was able to get a call through. It was somewhere between 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday or Tuesday. She's out.
Is she out hiking by the house? Or
she's out hiking by our house. We live right around 3,000 feet. In the Sierra Nevada mountains and our foothills in this case, I guess. She had been telling me that she goes, well, I'm going down this Powerhouse Road. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I've been down that Powerhouse Road with a girlfriend before, and I didn't like the half mile that we walked, I'm like, I think I need to have a gun because it's getting more remote, it's getting further away from the freeway and, more civilization. And at that time, as far as I know, there was nobody living down there. My wife said that she had hiked down that road once or twice before, no issues. And I'm like, okay, well, but this particular morning, she says, I've been texting you. And I'm like, yeah, okay, didn't hear a thing. And she goes, something's following me. Can you come down here? I'm really scared. And I could hear her voice shuddering. Got my 45, I got my hard cast ammo, and grabbed the dogs, and I take off for that road, that Powerhouse Road. And as I'm going down there, I'm blowing the horn all the way down that road. It's across the freeway from where we live. And I ain't going down there, so I'm looking at the terrain as I'm going down there, and everything on the right-hand side of the road is all uphill, so everything on the left side is downhill. Just a note for later. So I try to call her again, and I can only think that I do get in touch with her. I said, where are you? And she told me, she says, the first time she says, I'm hiding. So I'm trying to call her. I'm probably 2 miles down the road, and I'm like, where are you? I'm hiding. You'll find me when I get down here. I'm by the bridge. And she hangs the phone back up again. So I'm thinking, why would you hang the phone up? But then it dawns on me, if somebody's trying to find you, you don't want to be making any more noise than you possibly have to. You certainly don't want to be trying to engage somebody on a phone conversation. So I get down to the bottom of the hill, and literally I see her walk out from underneath the bridge on the far side, and it's all open over there. The rest of this is fairly overgrown. So she did the smart thing. She went through a gate, got across the other side of the river, and went and hid underneath the bridge where it's fairly open. And at that point, I said, what do you mean something's following you? And she goes, well, it's following me on the road. She says, I walked down the road about a mile and didn't hear anything. I'm just having a good time. And she says, all of a sudden, I hear something following me on my right side, on the uphill side. And she says, and it's growling at me in a low growl. And then she says, then it crosses over to the left side. And I said, well, how do you know it crossed over to the left side? She goes, well, because the growl started on the left side. And then she says, I felt like I was being herded because I couldn't turn around to go back because I would run right into it. And then I'm like, yeah, that's...
Did she ever see it, or was it mainly growling off to the left?
Yeah, she just heard it growling, and like she said, it moved to the other side of the road. But did it really, or was there two of them?
Yeah, and it's like you and I talked about the other day. You know, most wild animals, they don't herd you into anything. Like you and I were talking, cougar would have had her. She would have been fighting off a cougar. It's not going to sit and play games like that. What did she think it was?
Well, she won't go with the Bigfoot option, so, like I said, it's too bad she won't tell you the story because, certainly a lot more interesting coming from her perspective. I played, growls from cougars, mountain lions, and a bear, and she goes, I played her the scream. She goes, well, I never heard her scream. I said, well, I said, mountain lions, I said, if there's one around and it wants you to know that it's there, you're going to hear what sounds like a woman screaming at the top of her lungs. I said, other than that, the last thing you're going to hear is it crunching down on your neck and your head. And the thing, when she said that it was crossing the other side of the road, and as I mentioned before, the high side of the road's on the right side. I don't see an animal leaving the high side of the road because, they figured this out a long time ago. We gain more speed going downhill if we're going to attack something.
Right.
And the fact that, if it's smart enough to know that we can herd somebody by crossing over, that leads to, an intelligence a little bit higher than an animal.
Did it finally leave her alone when she went under the bridge?
Yeah, once she got across the bridge, one couldn't hear it. It's a river running down through there, and it's pretty loud. So yeah, and at that point I show up, and when she came, back, I mean, it was she could hardly get in the truck. She was shaking so bad.
I can imagine.
And then when I played, a bear sound for her growling, she goes, yeah, more like that, but not quite. And I'm like, and she goes, I know, don't say it, Bigfoot.
Yeah, it's, I guess no more hikes, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty much.
Down that road, anyway.
Down that road.
I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Good talking to you.
You too.
All right, bye-bye.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. Wes@SasquatchChronicles.com. I will see you guys back on Sunday. Have a good night, everyone.